The next thing, we're going to let the clerk take the roll call.
Dale Ames.
Present.
Harold Jorgensen.
Present.
Barry Wagner.
Present.
Jason Alders.
Present.
Kelly Piero.
Present.
Kristen Mullen.
Here.
Robert Schiller. Jeff Pilon.
Present.
Liz Stockman.
Present.
Okay, the next thing is we're going to approve or amend tonight's meeting agenda of October 23rd, 2018. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from,
October 23rd.
sorry.
Let's see.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Okay, Commissioner Alders made the motion. Do somebody second it?
I'll second.
Commissioner Pearl seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next thing we don't have to really approve the next one because it's already been approved by the city, but does anybody who wants to make any comments to the joint meeting minutes of September 25, 2018? You want to make any comments, we can add to it. Seeing there's no comments, then we'll go on to the next. We'll have the clerk read the policy.
The agenda as printed or amended will be followed, so all necessary and needed actions by the Planning and Zoning Commission will be addressed. The agenda can be amended by proper motion. Business from the floor is welcome and allotted on our agenda. When comments from the floor are made, you must first be recognized by the chairman. Second, state your name and address for the record. And third, you will have no more than 3 minutes to state your comments or concerns. Copies of the agenda are available on the back table, and there is a sign-in sheet and another sign-up sheet for floor items if you wish to speak. Please turn off all cell phones.
Okay, I'm going to ask if there's anybody have a floor item at this time. Okay, there's no floor items, so we'll go on. What we're going to do is open a public hearing. The public hearing has to do with a lot request by Josh Peterson and Michael and Len Hollenbeck for property owned at 8335 and 8359 Viking Boulevard to reconstruct or subdivide 3 lots into 2 parcels to accommodate industrial development and storage facilities. A conditional permit is required to allow multiple buildings on a single parcel. So this time we're going to ask our planner, Liz Stockton, to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Peterson-Hollenbeck property is located on the very western edge of our industrial park on the north side of Viking Boulevard. It is a 13.59 acre parcel plus a 1.6 acre Anoka County parcel. They're re-subdividing it. It's 2 lots now, it will be 2 lots. The proposed parcel size for the storage facility is 5.17 acres. And they plan to acquire the Anoka County parcel to obtain the necessary lot frontage onto Viking Boulevard, which is 165 feet of lot width and 50 feet of street frontage. They require the conditional use permit for multiple buildings on a single parcel. The first graphic here is showing the certificate of survey. The Hollenbeck property is long and skinny, north to south here, and so there's a drainage ditch that runs across the center of the property. The storage facility will be the southern portion of this site. This graphic is showing an aerial photo of the region, and we'll talk a little bit later about the screening potential of the existing vegetation versus whether or not they need extra landscaping. The property is supposed to be screened against the C1 or anything non-industrial, so that would be the C1 on the east side and the residential on the west side. This is the National Wetlands Inventory map that again shows this fairly large drainage ditch across the center. There's an existing farmstead. The Hollenbeck residential site is to the north. The development site we're talking about is the southern portion. There's a wetland in front, which actually encompasses a good part of this 1.6 acre piece that the county currently owns. So this little piece that is between the wetland and 22 is really not developable, or if it ever is, it will be quite a small structure. But for now, we're talking about this land between the two wetlands. So here's the proposed site plan for the storage facility. There are 5 buildings on a single parcel. You have a single entrance that is utilizing the existing 33-foot access that goes to the Hollenbeck farm. It's a paved area all surrounding the structures, and there's a stormwater pond on the north end. So north is to the left here on the picture. Some comments that we have as staff. The zoning ordinance requires a 22 to 24 foot access into the property, and I believe they're showing an 18-foot access. So one of the issues is they're going to need to widen this out, not only to meet ordinance standards, but also to meet the fire code. The one handout that I passed out was the fire chief's review of this site. And he too said that 22 feet is the minimum. And according to the city engineer and I, we prefer to see 24, but we can talk more about that. So there will be some impacts to this wetland, I think, as they enter the property. And another thing related to access is right now the proposed lot line is excluding this driveway. And I'm thinking it might be better to include the driveway as part of this lot and then actually have an easement that provides access to the Hollenbeck farm. Since the Hollenbeck farm is an interim use and will someday be redeveloped, and this would be more of the permanent use or the highest and best use for this zoning, it might make more sense to include that driveway as part of this lot. Let's see. So what I want you to focus on is the lot split itself, which is again just a reconfiguration, and then the conditional use permit for the multiple buildings. The engineers did bring a revised graphic showing a slightly altered entrance to the facility to try to address the turning radii that are required for those large trucks and fire vehicles. Another thing that's needed is a minimum of a 20-foot gate to get that fire truck through the gate, and a spot where a fire truck can turn around at this facility or at the terminus of this driveway. So, generally speaking, you know, this is definitely an allowed use of the industrial zoning. This is showing the grading and the stormwater pond. I know the city engineer made a comment that has to be enlarged slightly. Shows the silt fence to protect the wetland around the paved area. So, let's see. And then as far as the exterior of the facility, the buildings, as I stated in the report, the ordinance requires that 50% of the structures be something other than metal. We do allow a finished metal on a portion of our industrial buildings, but 50% has to be a higher quality material such as stone or rock-based block, brick, that kind of thing. So the ends that face the residential district to the west and the ends that face the commercial district to the east, as well as the side of the building that faces Viking, has to be upgraded. I mean, this is what they're proposing. So this is one thing that staff can verify at the time they submit a building permit. They would submit, full-scale elevation drawings, and we would measure the percentage of materials and make sure that that meets code. This is just a few notes from the city engineer regarding some of these turning radius that is kind of the same types of things that the fire chief had noted. So I think at this time, I will let me just say one quick thing here. This is a conceptual street network drawing out of our transportation plan. So the Hollenbeck property is right here on the blue, the edge of our industrial zone. There's a planned future road, or possible road. We really would like to make some sort of connection from Iguana Street over through what is possibly an expansion area for industrial development. That's currently being discussed under our comp plan amendment. But what the transportation plan shows and what the county requires is the full access intersection is way over here. This would be the Mueller property, and this is McCrae's 15-acre parcel here. So the full intersection is here. Iguana would not be a full intersection if 22 wherever became a divided highway. And then I had a few comments about landscaping. The ordinance does require landscaping, and that's based on the square footage of total buildings proposed. And so in doing those calculations, I had some suggestions about how we could make this look like, somewhat of a tree-lined boulevard, and to break up some of these paved surfaces by having some plantings along maybe the ends of the buildings, or somewhere where they can be, maintained. So with that, I know the applicant would like to make a few comments regarding screening and circulation. And so Josh is here with his engineer.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Todd Olin. I'm with Bogart & Peterson. And thank you for having us on the agenda tonight and hearing our request. We came through with a conceptual layout and had that review a month and a half ago or so. And since then, we have submitted drawings. The consulting engineer and planner have been through the drawings comprehensively. In addition to that, we submitted the drawings to the county engineer to obtain their comments regarding the intersection or the drive access at Viking Boulevard. All of those comments have been copied in your packet. I got a copy of that earlier. And so yeah, I don't want to go over all of the details that Liz did. She did a wonderful job explaining the whole project. It is a storage facility proposed. There's a great deal more. One of the things I wanted to point out in the master of the Conceptual Street Network is one of the things that I showed on one of the exhibits I brought in for as far as a buffer plan that I showed the last time around, was that the vast majority, but the land immediately west of our property is primarily a wetland complex on the east, adjacent to our property line, and then row crop on the west. So about half of that property, when you're looking at future street map, I'm sure all those details that come out or flush out in the design process, but There's very little upland area up to the west of our, immediately west of our site. With that being said, we're looking for, or requesting your consideration for approval to the city council regarding the conditional use, this use in that location. One of the reasons we had comments on the buffer areas is because of a big wetland to the west that serves as a natural buffer. There's a large stand of trees that is between the development and Viking Road, and then there's quite a distance between us and Iguana, the next right of way. They are differing uses, but there are a lot of natural buffers in place there now. If we need to supplement those things with landscaping, obviously we'll do whatever it takes to adhere to the zoning ordinance. And that really is the message that I have tonight. We've had a chance to go through all of the requirements, and we aren't opposed to anything that we read. There are some items we need to clarify with the fire chief. There are other items we need to clarify with your engineer, and as well as your planner. But I think those things, again, can be ironed out between now and the time that the city commission or city council meets. We're here if you have any questions for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So
Mayor.
can you articulate, Liz, do you know, what are those things? Because it's always unnerving to have a commission make a recommendation and then find out what those open issues are before the council. The commission maybe didn't get a chance to weigh in on. Can you articulate the outstanding things
Yes.
so they can weigh that when they're making the recommendation?
So the critical things that you're making a recommendation about or for are the lot split and the conditional use permit for the multiple buildings. The lot split is very straightforward. It meets the minimum lot size requirements, lot width, and the frontage. So the actual lot split itself, the engineer and I have no issue with. Conditional use permit for multiple buildings. Staff is fine with the 5 buildings proposed as long as they can meet the fire chief's request for turning radius and access to that site. And something like that can be discussed and reviewed again later. In other words, as long as you're okay with the placement and orientation of those buildings, they can submit a plan or have a more detailed conversation with the fire chief and just move forward in that regard. So, without the special permit required, these commercial industrial uses would just come to staff for review, and then we would verify that they are in compliance with the zoning ordinance and or subdivision ordinance in the case of the lot split, and then move those along. So I know the city engineer stated at the end of his report as well that he would require revised plans, but that he was generally fine with this layout. The one question that stands out to me, or maybe two, is the screening. What is your feeling on the screening? If you want to require additional screening, or if you're fine with the natural screening that's there, and then we just require the trees that are necessary based on the ordinance language. Now, there's quite a high abundance of shrubbery that is required under the ordinance, which could be transferred over to larger trees, not one for one, but I mean, let's say every 3 shrubs is, you could put a larger tree out here, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to place a lot of small shrubbery that's going to be, have to be maintained out here, unless it's off to the sides and, can be in a somewhat natural state. I think the bigger trees are more appropriate unless they're at the front of the site. And then the last thing really is for you, the commission to talk about is that access. And if it's okay with you, a minimum of 22 feet would meet the city code and the fire code. And then if you have any comments on, who has actual ownership of that access. like I said, to me it makes more sense that the ownership be with the primary use or the long-term use rather than the residential use, which is an interim use. So there's 33 feet along the east side, and if we just move the lot line to include that, and then there's some type of easement drafted and reviewed by the city attorney to provide access to the site. And then Mr. Peterson plans to buy the Hollenbeck property, so he has control over that northern portion. And so before anything else happens, we would again review the access to any future development to the north. So I hope that helps.
Just a couple. I made an exhibit to illustrate that we conform to the fire access requirements and widened the road. So I think it was interpretation mistake on my own part. The way I read the zoning ordinance, and I checked it back today, was that there's a maximum 24-foot wide drive allowed. And that's the way it's stated, but maybe there's a revision or something going on. But this is showing a 22-foot wide road, and it does work. It's still, we had a bit of, the wetland is the impact of wetland area that we're talking about is this area shaded here. So basically we'd widen the road. It would be a 1-on-3 side slope going down to the existing wetland, and that fits within, again, the area of a de minimis application for wetland impact. So I hate to call it wetland impact minor, but it's relatively small. But this does illustrate the 22-foot wide road. We did adjust the entrance to the site from the access drive over to the south a bit to make sure that the turning radii for a fire vehicle does work. So it does come in, it can circle around, and then what we have is it going in between the last two buildings right here. And then the other requirement by the fire chief is also to be able to reach all buildings within 150 feet of hose length. So we actually measure around the buildings, not obviously, they're not going to throw a hose over it, but so we measure around, and what we do is for that last building, it's 110 feet at its longest point at any direction. So we have access all the way around the perimeter. We have the hose length requirement adhered to, and we also incorporated a turnaround in accordance with the fire chief's regulations as far as a 70-foot wide hammerhead, so we could get back in and then not have to back all the way down the driveway to get out. So there's really two means of coming in, accessing for the fire apparatus, coming in, circling the site, or sometimes there are those false alarms. They get to the gate, there's nothing going on, they need to turn around their equipment, so they have a place to do that. This, of course, has to be verified by the fire chief. It has not yet, but it does adhere to all of the information that we've been given. Did you want maybe pass it around or closer look? Or?
That's really helpful.
Yeah, I can see it.
And the de minimis is 1,000 square feet, right?
Yeah, and we're at about 450 square feet right now
Okay, great.
with the widening.
Okay, great. So that just makes the process a little simpler for him to go through that approval process.
There are additional, in the letter from the county engineer, there were some, what I'm going to call minor items that we have to address as well. For example, there's some brush that needs to be cleared out at the entrance for a clear vision area. I'm trying to go off my memory here, but there were some items that they called out as well that need to be incorporated. And then, of course, these will go back to your engineer, which will be resubmitted back to the county for final.
So this is envisioned as an area that will be kind of like a shared driveway system up to that future road.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There is a gravel driveway there now, more of a 2-track / gravel driveway that goes back to the homestead. That's going to remain. So if there is, for whatever reason, if they need to travel back there for emergency or whatever, that's going to remain. There's going to be full access to that area as well.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I just would like to ask Josh what kind of a gate he's proposing there.
It'd be similar or comparable to the one we currently have, an electronic automatic gate that would self-close. It'd be a keypad system and the aesthetic of using. Mind if I address the council?
yes, go ahead.
So, my name is Josh Peterson, and I'm the applicant. I guess a couple just things that I have on my front. I understand that I need to have meet certain construction standards on the east and the west side, but in a self-storage facility, to achieve a 50% masonry facade, it's slightly difficult if you have any doors on that side. I'm just wondering if there's any other potential, I don't know, accommodations or things we could do. I mean, I could ultimately build a facade up and put masonry excessively high just to get to that 50%, but the doors take up a significant portion and they're not actually counted in favor towards that. So I'm just wondering if there's something we can do. And on the west side, to Todd's point, you know, it's lowland as it sits currently, and ultimately, you know, I mean, I think if we put or detailed out where the wetland is, you're going to see that you're never really going to be able to see that, and the height and the current mature trees that are there are going to block it. So, and ultimately, if to the west is going to be a future industrial area, which I understand it currently isn't today, it doesn't seem that it's that rational to, I don't know, propose this. I guess it just seems wasteful in that sense. So that's
So-
my.
Here's the wetland he's talking about. You know, I'd say, yeah, for sure it goes about halfway up, but you do have this buffer here from 22. So what he was referring to about the doors is that this building on the south that faces 22, you can't make that 50%, you know, masonry, for instance, because you've got all the garage doors. So if you're okay him just building the masonry around it, or, you know, to the extent that it's possible, given the screening they have, or, you know, do you lose that row of doors and you have just the back of a building with a more decorative side, you know, but we are quite some distance here. I don't know what this distance setback is, but normally our setback would be 150 feet from the center line, and you've got a 75-foot right away to the center line, so, you know, you'd normally be up in here with the building potentially. So he's more than 3 times, you know, further back with the setback.
And just to jump for 1 second, as far as like the proposed landscaping plan and whatnot, I'm totally open to actually doing something decorative closer to 22 if everyone's in favor or okay with it. I think it would be kind of actually aesthetically pleasing to do and spend some extra time up there as far as just decorative landscaping, some thought put into it. It's still like a natural look for the most part, but something to accent it. I don't really have that worked out yet, I guess, but it's just something, as you guys are discussing it, I wouldn't mind spending a little extra money up there to create something, or we can keep it natural too. I'm open to it. But.
Because your sign would be up around,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, looking for comments on the screening, landscaping, mostly. And then the trash receptacle issue, Josh, do you have, I mean, I'm guessing you have to have trash somewhere.
Yeah, actually we don't, and we don't for a reason, because people would just fill it up if we didn't. So it's one of those things that, you know, every once in a while, are there a few things that I end up picking up? Absolutely. But if I put a trash receptacle there, it'll be full and overfilled, and it'll be random couches and things like that that nobody wants to see. So I think as it sits right now, you know, I'd rather just handle the issues ongoing as they come up, you know, which I'm not going to say that they don't, but I mean, I guarantee you that someone would empty their entire garage out into a trash enclosure if I gave them a trash enclosure. And they believed that that was part of the deal. So it's really, I think, it would create more problems than anything.
One more quick comment. Typically, when we're going into a site such as this, we're, in some cases, in a lot of cases, we're forced to take trees out to make way for the development. This is somewhat unique in that the wooded areas here are in the lowland, wetland areas, and so the result of the site plan, I submitted some photos when I was standing in the middle of that field last time I was here. The photos are basically showing, pointed to the west, the tree row to the west. There's trees there as well, wetland, to act as a buffer going towards the west and that farmland. Yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty heavy row of tree, or heavy tree line there, and then it goes into more of a low brush area, and then it goes into the tree line right below my note where the color changes, right below your red spot there to the right. Right there.
Right. Oh,
That's a tree line as well. It's pretty heavy. My point is, when I looked from the road into the site, there were a couple of spots that I thought were, I'm trying to imagine it, of course, with trees off, or leaf off conditions. And there were a couple of areas I thought might be bare in the winter, so I plugged those holes with deciduous or coniferous trees that are shown on the site plan now. But going to the west, you'd be very hard pressed to see or know that it's there. From the east, there's the landscaping use. Is that right?
Yes, right here.
Which is slightly ironic when we're talking about tree buffers.
So if we were to, the distance, and there's a building on the corner there, but between the distance and the buildings and whatnot, again, you'd have to be looking for it on a certain angle to see it. So that was our, so if there's some landscaping we do up for the road that's how we'd actually see, I think that'd be a bonus, I guess. Just so it's not in the site distance, or the clear site distance area. So it doesn't obstruct the view for turning movements and whatnot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll go on here, and we're going to ask the clerk if all legal publications and the mailings and postings have been completed.
Yes.
Okay. And this time we're going to open this up. Anybody in the public have any comments they want to make to this? Yes, give your name.
I'm Kim Cottney, 8506 201st Avenue Northwest, Elk River. I'm the one that owns the land right to the west. I'm wondering now, what does that do for my land? Is there going to be a road there, or is there?
We have a conceptual plan, and this has been in place since 2013. Where to go? Here it is. This actual frontage road plan has been in place for 5 or 6 years. This doesn't mean there will sure be a road there. What this is saying is that the county will only allow us a full access intersection here, meaning either a four-way stop or a lighted intersection where you can cross 22. So the access in the future would either come up Iguana and possibly go across and connect back down. So we need those, through streets like we have here between 22 and 201st. If we plan to extend that, we'll know more after our comprehensive plan is updated. The types of land uses that the city council wants to plan for there. So no, there's nothing in stone. It's nothing that the city is going to go out and acquire. It wouldn't happen until development happens. So if you're not planning to develop, you don't have to worry about condemnation or anything like that.
Okay, so as of now, it's going to stay the way it is unless I sell it, or?
Correct. You can use it as agriculture as long as you would like to. Yeah, and even if it does end up being rezoned or planned for future commercial industrial, you can still use it in the way you want to as a residence or as agriculture. And you're only taxed on the use, you're not taxed on the zoning. So
And will there be some kind of, something done with the draining ditch or
In the long term, you mean, when it's developed?
when the buildings get put up there, the storage? Will there be anything done
Oh.
with the?
No, they're not disturbing that. So that's actually considered wetland by the state. And so it's to their advantage to preserve the ditch. So the ditch is up here, kind of along the property line that they're proposing. So what they're doing here is adding a pond, a stormwater pond. And so all the water from around the buildings and then the building tops goes into that stormwater pond before it's released into the natural wetland. So this is like a filter. So you really shouldn't see any change to your ditch there. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are there two ditches running there?
2 ditches?
Yeah.
Um,
This one, is there one just north of that as well?
There
oh, up
is.
here. Yeah, it is quite, I think that is a ditch.
It is.
That's the one that's giving us problems in the industrial park.
How is that?
Backing up, that's our bumps in the road there on the corner. It's from the water not running off. There's a couple of issues there.
Because this pond is somehow tied to that, right?
And it used to run north, there's the culverts aren't quite laying on that pond. So we gotta check, the ditch is running west and it used to run north. When they built the industrial park, they put the culverts in stepped the wrong direction. That's for another day, but there's water issues in the north end of that. That was to where there was a second ditch in the south.
Oh, okay.
I'm assuming they run together, go
Over here
further
somewhere.
west
Yeah.
and head south on the south side of the Craze property. I mean, the west side of the Craze property.
Okay, is there anybody else that has comments from the public about this? Seeing none, now, does anybody in the planning and zoning have any questions here to ask?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
So help me with the 100-foot screening. I mean, it's not possible the way this is currently laid out to show a 100-foot screening on the west side if you don't take into account the neighboring property, correct? Because it goes within 10 feet of the property line with curb.
Correct. So, right, I mean, right now it's residential A. Will it always be residential A? I don't know. So I guess, you know, with that natural buffer, you know, do you still feel that you want additional screening? Because, you know, whoever develops the property to the west will, you know, likely not be impacting this basin here. You know, the trees, the tree line is, you know, pretty much right on the line. I mean, this is a really nice stand of trees here. And, you know, I'm not quite sure what will happen. I guess that's part of the question, is we're not, you know, as the land uses are guided now in our 2030 plan, which is our adopted land use plan, this is set to stay low-density residential. There has been discussion about possibly extending our commercial industrial. It just hasn't been, we're not far enough along to know that for certain.
Because if we don't approve the screening variance, his buildings, there's no way it can be 200 feet long. They've got to be about 120 feet long versus 200 feet long.
Yeah, I mean, for the shape of the site, it would be difficult to, you know, require that amount of screening on a site like this. Now, it does say that the 100 feet can include wetlands and trees and natural areas. So if we, on this side, I'm not as concerned,
So it's a commercial property.
yeah, it's commercial, it's,
Landscaping.
and you've got open area there that's growing area.
So the question for the council is, it's got to be 10 feet or the project may or may not be viable, but if we let it go the way it is, we have to assume that the natural screening that's there is going to stay in place in the future.
Right, to some degree.
Well,
That's not moving.
yeah, to at least at least 50% of this is gonna stay if it's around this wetland area, I'm surmising. It's just not, it's impossible to know, but we are set back a long way from 22. So that's a little bit, that is helpful as well. But, it's really,
Are there any other questions that the planning and zoning might have? Seeing none, we'll come back again to the, ask the audience if there's anybody else that would like to make comments to this.
Could I interject in?
Yes.
I guess my comment would just be that ultimately, the industrial park is pretty much filled up, and the only other industrial land that I'm aware of is north of 47 on, north of 22 on 47. I think Marie McCullum owns part of it. And then the other would be south of 22 on 47. There's some industrial on the west side, but there's really, I don't know if you can let me know if there's anything that I'm missing, but I don't think there's really anything, any other industrial land. So I think it's natural, from a planning perspective, that the industrial would expand from the current industrial, thus, going west and whatnot. Obviously, it's not my place to say where it's going to expand. I just assume that was a natural place. And I understand that people own it at this time that maybe aren't willing to develop or move or whatever, and that's totally fine. But I'm assuming that that's a natural process.
Are there any more comments? Any more comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And at this time now, we're gonna make a recommendation of possible conditions and findings.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to suggest some sort of a compromise here with the landscaping. For instance, maybe we take 20 feet off the ends of these buildings and we move this paved area in slightly and just plant some trees here along the lot line. We know we have the buffer for sure here, the wetland basin. This part to me seems like the part that, if anything, would be, more vulnerable or open to the west. He has to meet the landscape requirements anyway, somehow with 18 trees. Whether he lines them up over here or along 22 or here, you could make a recommendation in that regard. Some of the smaller shrubs, or they don't have to be real small shrubs. You could plant dogwood or some larger things that are kind of native along here too. So whatever you think.
How much space is there between the road that goes around behind the building?
There's only, 5 feet there on this
The
side?
property line? 10 feet.
10 feet
To
from
the
what I see.
In that space, you could probably get some deciduous trees. I don't know that you'd want to plant evergreens there. But you also don't want them to get crushed by the snow removal either. Although they might be pushing a lot of that back here to the pond.
Your suggestion was make those 3 buildings 20 feet shorter?
Well, if he's got 10 feet here, I mean, you know, maybe it wouldn't even need to be that much. I'm sure there's some dimension, you know, that makes sense. Like, in other words, if you lose one garage door. But,
What if you go 10 feet instead of 20?
yeah, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a compromise.
Well, 10 would give you a little more space for a buffer, right?
Yeah, if everything moved back 10, you'd have 20 feet along the property line. And that would be a fairly reasonable, I mean, you usually plant about 25 for a evergreen, but oh,
What would happen if everything got straightened out with the world there, and you would gain on each end then? The buildings, you see what I mean?
straight in here, like use this space?
Tip them so they're straight with the
Oh,
world.
I see, perpendicular
Yeah,
to the,
and you know, they're long enough that you're gonna gain on each corner, you see quite a bit, you see that?
I see what you're saying.
And you really wouldn't have to do too much to it to do that, would you?
Was there a reason that you angled the building?
The shape of the wetland
Oh, okay. Right here?
in both sides.
Okay.
There's the ditch that goes on one side
That's
and then the
an angle.
wetland on the other.
The property line's angled that way too. The applicants just suggested a fence if that were to satisfy the commission. Put a fence of some sort here.
We have a 6-foot fence surrounding the entire site right now. In the last meeting we were in, there were several conditional uses that were up for your consideration, and several of them more, discussion was to put the fiberglass or the plastic, the PVC slats in there to block, help buffer the view or whatever. We have a fence there now, and we certainly could do that on that whole side. We have a 6-foot fence proposed for security that's chain link, so it'd just be a matter of putting the buffer strips in it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
what about trading some of the stone facing on the buildings for a stone faced fence?
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Then you've got a natural looking exterior, you don't have to put it on the buildings, but you get something that looks a little better to neighboring properties than slats and chain link fence.
I like that. How does the commission feel about that?
I think it's probably better than losing, I mean, I would assume you'd be losing a whole stall on each building if you had to make it smaller. And we're also buffering what we don't know at this point.
Could I have one thing to that? When we came into this site, there's actually 2 lots there that Josh is purchasing, and between the wetlands, and I have to comment on the wetlands to the west. The wetlands to the west are far larger than what's shown in the National Wetland Inventory. That natural buffer that you're going to end up with when somebody does a delineation is going to be far, far greater than what's shown. I walked it, most of it's water up over my ankles in the forested area. And it's being farmed right now in the west. If it could be farmed, if it were any upland in there, it would be being farmed right now. So that entire area there is what will eventually, in my opinion, be considered wetland. That being said, when Mr. Peterson bought this property, there were 2 lots. When he purchases it, excuse me, there's 2 lots involved, and when we did the wetland inventory, we basically lost the front lot due to it being regulated wetland, And then once you put the setbacks in place from the road, the setbacks in place for the wetland, it basically becomes undevelopable. So what we're trying to do is just basically work with what is currently upland without impacting anything. But it did restrict us significantly with what we have shown. So, you know, I guess if you would please consider the area that's not developable now. So yeah, we are looking for each bay that we can get on the upland area.
Based on the layout, Liz, is there any chance that that land is going to be, they're not going to be able to build them within 100 feet of it anyway, are they?
Well,
On that west side.
he's got a point. I mean, if this were up high and dry, they would be farming it, so.
So it's like,
But,
do
you
we
know,
need to do, I guess the question is, we need to make an action on the screening, so if we're all convinced that no one's ever going to be able to develop within 100 feet of it, we have that information and it kind of meets our requirements of there's natural habitat around the area that is not going to be developed. If we think it is going to be developed, then we can say, is a stone fence, faced fence the right call, or is a setback with some pine trees the right call? But you know, ideally he wants to leave it the way it is, and if we put a stone fence out there that you can never see because there's 100, 300 feet of trees in the way, that doesn't make a ton of sense either.
It's over 1,000 feet wide.
well, but not just right here, right? What's the distance, do you think, here?
Each building is 40 feet, and between the buildings is what, 25?
So 120, 190. See that? Yeah,
Because the rest of it meets the, I would say, the intent of this, the 100 feet, right? As soon as you come around that curve, there's enough fall between the wetland and everything else, and you've got that 100-foot barrier. It's that section that jets down, right?
Here, yeah.
Right.
Well, this is for sure wet, I mean, on the National Wetland Inventory. So what he's saying is it actually extends up higher and is creating a buffer along this whole side. So you know,
If you compared the wetland inventory map to the actual delineation that was done, the delineation shows there's far more wetland than the actual map.
yeah, that's usually the case. Well, I wouldn't say that, but yeah. I did recognize that fact, yeah, on your site. So what if you, let's see, the landscaping requires 18 trees and 115 shrubs. You know, based on the size of the building. You know, you've got 10 feet there, you could plant shrubbery along it, some large, something real tough, dogwoods, whatever it might be, I don't know. And then use the rest of the landscaping, you know, kind of in the front or along 22.
Seems like a lot of landscaping.
How high does the shrubs as a rule grow?
Pardon me?
How high does the shrubs grow?
Well, it depends what you choose. I mean, shrubs can be 3 feet high, 2 feet high, they can be as high as 20 feet. Some of them are big, large.
There's no adjoining properties that have landscaping like that though. I mean, the next one over is landscaping. I don't know. Seems like it's gonna look like a lot of landscaping in a little area. I mean, you're buffering, if they're to buffer that, nothing else is buffered. Everything else is right up against the road.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So this mowing too, just keep in mind that our, you know, our intent is always to make sure that we meet the ordinance requirements. So if we make a finding that the existing vegetation satisfies the 100-foot screening, that's great. We still have to address the landscape requirements separately. If you want to say, you've got 18 trees, if you have 115 shrubs, let's say, you divide that by 3 or whatever, and you allow some large trees in exchange for all those small shrubs. This is 5 acres, so, they're showing a 2.5 acre, probably at least 2 acre impervious surface area there. So, it may not look like much here, but it's a large lot. I mean, some of the lots out here are only 1.5 acres. But that's our goal, is to make sure they're meeting the requirements. If they need to vary from it, then we need to go through the variance process. I don't think this is worth, I think we can come to some kind of agreement here with landscaping and avoid that.
Does that stuff need to be laid out right now?
No, I mean, what you can do is motion to have them submit a revised plan and a landscape plan, and then we can evaluate that as staff and provide that to the council at their meeting as well. So I don't see any reason to hold this back if you all are comfortable with the site layout.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Pearl.
I want to look into the idea of buffering along County Road 22 just because there isn't going to be much there anyways, and I think it'll help dress up the area between road and the wetland before getting to the buildings. I don't know what style of fencing we're talking about when we're talking stone fence. I have no clue what you guys are thinking.
So to me, a stone fence would be like a rock-based CMU, which would be a concrete masonry unit. So they can be colored, they can...
Are you talking like pillars with fence between it, or are you talking an actual wall of it?
So I would assume that I would build a wall, 5 to 6 feet tall out of CMU rock-based block.
And you're okay with that?
Are we talking about on the west side or the south, or
That's
which?
what I was going to ask next.
Yeah, so I was under the assumption that we're talking on the west side. As far as the south goes, I thought the tone of the direction that everyone's going was, we're 3 times more than the typical site from the road. So therefore, there's a lot of current buffering in place, and we would add to it and improve what was already there. But due to the fact that we're not taking down any of the trees that are currently there. I mean, there's a lot of natural existing buffer there now. That was, I think, what Todd had alluded to with the photos that he had taken too. I don't know. He's shown that also. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
my assumption when saying the stone face wall was just on the west. Because the question was if you didn't want to take away any more of the units, do anything to reduce the size of the units, you've got a 10-foot, whether it's something like a narrow stone face wall or lilacs would work. Because they're going to stay within the 10 feet of the area. You have to have something that doesn't detract from the planned units that they've got there. I do think to the south there towards Viking Boulevard, we've got plenty of opportunity there to screen that, to buffer that. But I'm just saying, because of the narrow width on the west, that's for something, if you're going to, and again, if he's trading off some of the stone face on buildings you're not going to see by putting it on the wall, or putting a shrub like a traditional lilac in there, it's going to go to 12 to 15 feet tall and stay within the confines of a 10-foot width. But just something that doesn't make them change the size of the buildings from what they proposed here. It's just because they're so close to the line on that west that will make a difference. And yes, right now it's a wetland, who knows what it's gonna be in the future. I agree, we're trying to maintain the compliance with our ordinances, but
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. If they had a buffer, well, lilacs or shrubs on that west side there, should take care of it.
You'd be good with that?
I would be, I don't know.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Pearl.
The other thing I wanted to address is that we're looking at this plan that Todd brought in with the 22-foot wide driveway and the proposed fire department's recommendations to the roads and turnarounds and all that stuff too. So that layout there would be what we'd probably end up even looking at. Is that correct, Stockman?
Yep, that doesn't change that west side.
No, I know, and but it changes the front, the south
Yeah.
side and some layouts up there.
Right, that's correct. That looks acceptable from a staff standpoint and some of the issues that the engineer and I raised. And if the fire chief is good with that, yeah, he would have an opportunity to comment, so.
I think you ought to put in drawbridge. You know, Zimbrota claims to have the only covered bridge in the state, so that's what they're known for. We could have the only drawbridge in the state.
If it was stone, it'd give
There's gotta
people
be,
some
right?
building up their garbage.
Yeah, I'll take some non-recourse debt on that one too.
Alternative transportation funds, maybe?
I'm sure.
Okay, are we, somebody here, Barry, you were gonna say,
Mr. Chair, I guess I was wondering, it appears on that west side they're actually kind of cutting into the woods that's there. I guess I was wondering if maybe we should have them shorten the buildings to 10 feet, but just leave natural buffer farther onto the property. Because right now it looks like they'd be cutting into the woods to get width and clearing right to the lot lines, what it looks like, I guess, to get your grade down to that side. That would just be an opportunity if we wanted to try to leave some, help a buffer on that side, which be at least on a natural buffer, more on his property.
Mr. Chair?
yes,
Yeah, it just occurred to me too, that if we're including that driveway on their lot, we're not gonna have that setback, that added setback there.
Right.
So you will be gaining some space. So maybe if you could apply that on the west side, you know, to either save the existing vegetation or fill in as needed.
Josh will have to weigh in on this, of course, but with the change of the property line and then having an easement on the drive, like Liz was describing, I mean, if there's an adjustment that needs to take place, or even a minor adjustment to the buildings and whatnot, I don't think we're opposed to that. I think,
No, I mean, we did talk about this briefly, but just so we're on the same page. You're referring to moving the lot line to the east.
the lot line will be the east line,
Right.
and then we'll have an easement on the drive to serve the property to the north.
So
But if
this,
we can shift the property or the development slightly to the east entirely as a result of that, what I guess I'm looking for from the commission is, what would be your minimum you'd like to see there? We have 10 feet, is it 15 feet in landscaping? Is it a number and a wall to work out because frankly, there are two challenges here. One is the facade issue, and when Josh spoke up, that the trade-off with a wall actually works for that. And it provides a buffer. Not sure that everybody wants to look at a wall in that area. That's your opinion, you know.
Yeah, to me, the wall seems pretty worthless back there. I guess that's what I was getting at.
I would agree, but
And I can still put masonry on it, I just can't achieve the 50% coverage on a wall when it has a door there, right? Because I'm gonna have 4 doors
Yeah.
and 40 feet, therefore each door is approximately, I don't know, call them 8 by 8, so, you know, I just, out of 40 feet, I have 32 lineal feet just at doors alone, which means it leaves me 4 total feet of of space to actually put masonry, I can't achieve 50% coverage unless I build the building excessively tall just to achieve that, right? Which is a complete waste and makes it even taller and more potential, visibly, yeah, so that's what I got.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
two questions. So Josh, you're looking at putting doors on the west ends as well as the north and south?
I would prefer to, yeah. It helps me mix up the unit sizes.
Okay.
Given the fact that these buildings are 40-foot depth on the ends, it gives me the ability to put 10-foot and 20-foot depth units. So,
And then if you're talking about moving the line, because the drive would be part of the property, moving the line further east, you still have to have some type of fencing there. You still got to enclose that east edge. You're not going to do that right on the road.
Right.
Because it's going to be traffic. Eventually, if you develop further back, yeah, you're still going to need some setback from that road. So I don't want to gain a whole bunch by getting too close, because as that north parcel develops, that'll be a road. You don't want your fence up right on the edge of the road.
Right.
I'm just trying to build the largest building for the tax base.
That's exactly what I had.
Wow, well spoken.
I mean, you could go 2 levels.
I care about Alvin and its ability to, have
It's time.
Well, let's have the grand garage condos.
Yes, yes, I close the public hearing. So we've got to act on this. Somebody'd like to make a motion on some of these things we suggested here?
Come on, Jason.
Okay, I'm in. So, I'm gonna make a motion to approve the lot split. So that's the, a couple of, and the other piece was to approve the multiple buildings on the CUP with the fire chief recommendation requirements. So Liz, you'll have to follow up on, is the fire chief satisfied with Rev B? And the third piece, from a motion standpoint on the screening, I guess I agree with Dale and Barry, is can we put some shrubs on the backside of the fence and forego the screening requirements, the 100 feet screening requirements on the west side, given the natural vegetation. And then as far as the remaining requirements on number of trees and shrubs, they have to meet the number of trees and shrubs for the number of buildings that they're putting up, and they can figure out where they want to put them.
I feel like we should get around to the class. I'll second that.
That's what, I think that's what, I guess my personal opinion is, it's back far enough, and I don't believe it's going to get developed on that back side of it. I don't believe building a rock wall back there is going to have a ton of value. I don't think anybody's ever going to see it.
I agree.
Okay, Commissioner Alders made the motion, and I believe Commissioner Moen seconded. Any further discussion?
I do have one thing. I'm just wondering about the 50% stone decorative stuff. What are we gonna do in lieu of that? What is the thoughts on that one? Because I don't think he needs to try to achieve 50%, because it is next to impossible.
Can you,
You can't.
Mr. Baker,
It's not possible.
can you achieve 50% minus the doors? I mean, that's half the building, right?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So what I would do when they submit plans is I would calculate all the wall area that aren't doors, and then see if we can achieve 50%. You know, like we could have 100% on the east ends of these buildings, because there's no doors on that east end, right? Because you had already agreed to provide the block base or rock base.
Yeah, I think when we came through the concept, the buildings were they oriented different or not?
No, they
No,
were
they were
the
like
same.
this.
I think in my, yeah, and it may be my fault, on the south side, I felt like I could achieve getting that 50% masonry, no problem, because I could mix it up a little bit in the sense that I could run the masonry higher on the south wall, and I could actually have an access from the ends on the, this might be confusing, but on the east and the west side of the south building. And therefore, by doing that, I would be able to, I don't know, how long is that building? Is it 120? Yep. So on 120 feet, if I did a 40-foot unit on each end, that's 80 total feet, and only had 40 feet left, so I could finagle or find a way to achieve that on the south building. That's not an issue there. Yeah, ultimately, I guess we just need to talk about how the south would be addressed, because for me to achieve 50% on the south is difficult if I can't have it on the east and the west side. If you want me to forego on the east side, I could do that, and then just have access on the south and the west side of the south building. I can find a way to meet the requirement. I just would run the masonry higher, so it wouldn't fully match that detail or go higher than that.
Yeah, but excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no way he's gonna achieve 50% without having it on the ends of those buildings. He's got a lot of wall area. And just by going halfway up going halfway up the sides, or even putting masonry completely around these large doors, that's still not gonna be 50% of that wall. So we need to find a way to meet that requirement.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Josh, what color are your doors going to be?
I'm not totally sure yet. I don't have color, but
I'm just thinking that the idea is it's architecturally appealing, and that's where the stone comes in. And maybe if you match the doors, I mean, a lot of storage units have bright orange doors, whether it's to identify a brand, a storage facility. But maybe and compromise would be less stone and more natural coloring to the doors that you do have, so it doesn't stand out so much from the stone.
so if I did an earth tone,
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe the commission would consider that, so that not having to go the full 50% requirement on stone facing, but have a natural coloring to the rest of it, so it doesn't draw the eye to the distinction between the stone and the door. You know, it'd be a compromise that would that still be acceptable, I understand, from an ordinance standpoint.
Would you like to add that to your motion?
Kill me now. And before you go there, the other question I had was, you have to decide on the 22 or 24 feet on the road. Right now, 22 is the minimum, 24 was what the staff was.
24 is the max.
24 is the max.
But you can't
22
read,
is the minimum for the fire department.
So
I guess the staff was recommending 24.
yeah, the motion should be if the fire chief can approve a 22-foot road. That seems like that would be acceptable. If he says it's got to be 24, then we got to figure out how to do 24. But if he's fine with 22, the requirement is to get fire trucks in and out, right?
The only thing that I'm thinking is if he's developing further down on the north end later, you've got a 22-foot in an industrial area that's going to be trucks.
my plan, yeah, my plan or intention is that the entire place would be all my use and storage or whatever. So I don't anticipate it wouldn't be a public road. I guess if that's what you're saying.
You're saying you want to go north?
Yeah.
Let's move out?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be the ultimate long-term plan, is that over time, as this site fills and builds, I would find, or just build additional units here. So I don't foresee myself wanting to develop it for other people's use other than that.
Mr. Chair,
yes, Commissioner Farrell.
I want to just understand one last thing about the buildings. Is it only the furthest south building that is actually going to be required to do all the stone, or is it all of the buildings?
No, it's just the part that faces 22.
Yep.
And that faces the,
So it's just
that east property.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
even with all of the buffering that's gonna go up there, that would still be required to be 50%?
Yep, it says, well, so you can allow deviation under this conditional use permit that he's requested. So it says the applicant shall have the burden of demonstrating that the proposed building maintains the quality and design and materials intended by this chapter. They're compatible and in harmony with other structures in the district. And the justification for deviation is not based on economic considerations. So if the group is happy with the, agreeing to the earth tone doors and having more of a, monotone look rather than bright orange doors.
And all the buildings would look the same, or are we saying that first building is earth tone and the rest of them are?
I like continuity in life, so I wouldn't get that impression. That's what I-
You know what it looked like, Georgetown Apartments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Peterson, one other question. Are you going to do doors on all of the east ends of all those buildings, or is it just going to be a couple of them? Units, are you going to have units
Yeah, I mean,
on the east ends?
it's, it's ideal for variations in sizes. If I do have the ability or freedom to do that, I can focus more on the west side for that same reason. But again, the people that are going to drive down this road are the people that are going to be going to the other portion of the storage site at some point. So they're going to be driving by doors while they drive to their storage unit at the northern portion of it. I understand that there's 2 lots at this point, but my ultimate long-term plan is to develop the entire site for self-storage. So anyone driving by the units on the east side would be looking at doors on their way to potentially their other storage site.
I only ask because the drawing that we have here looks like there's no doors on the ends. It's
Yeah.
just doors on the long sides. So that's what I was
Yep,
trying
no,
to...
that makes sense. I understand the confusion.
Okay.
I don't know, I guess how you guys look at it in that sense, like,
I'd like to comment,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. I would highly encourage you to require the east end to be the stone. That whole nursery could be redeveloped, it's all zone commercial. What if you get a really nice looking shopping mall in there and, you know what I mean? Not that this is the most, you're across from industry, but I'm just saying, if something were to change there, you kind of have to think about what the intent of that ordinance is. I think there's got to be some effort to upgrade and not just do 100% metal here. So if we can find a...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Pearl.
I guess what I was, in my mind of what I'm thinking through is that if he's only required to do the first south building, in order to forego some of the door space on that south side, would there be a compromise to do some stone on the east ends of all of those buildings that are going to be showing to a roadside to other people, even if there are doors on that side? Something to just break up all metal. And that would then doing the east end and the west end of the further south building. And then the east ends of the rest of the building, some sort of, some height that would get to the 50% that they're required to do on that building.
But clarity, the ask is the whole east end would be stone and there wouldn't be doors on it, so as you're driving past. And the west end would be doors and there would be the buffer on the west end so you wouldn't see it. And then the south end that faces the road would be, that's where we would say we would have earth tone doors because you can't get the 50% along the south, along 22, that abuts 22. That's my understanding.
That's That would be my preference, from a, ordinance standpoint, is to have no doors on the east side. And 100% rock face block. Because if you're adding up the total facade of all these structures, there's really not that much that's gotta be upgraded.
And then as people, if he develops the next set, as people drive past this, let's say, the first site, it's all stone going past it to the next site, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that, I apologize.
That's what I was wondering about.
Are you okay with the east ends being no doors with the rock face block?
Sure, and we're talking about 50%?
No,
Is that
we're
accurate?
talking about 100% of the east ends,
Yeah, so all the way up from the,
all the way up on those east ends, and then the other sides would just be, except for that south one, you'd have some rock in between the doors on the south building, but then the other buildings really don't, other than the east end, don't have any rock face. So, proportionally, you have a lot less rock face than you'd otherwise be required.
you'd have approximately 200 lineal feet by 8 feet tall approximately, so you'd have, you'd have like 1,600, is that right? 1,600 square feet of ceiling.
40 feet by 8 on each one.
And then you could have doors on the west end, is that,
Yeah, yep, correct.
and then the other two, so 3 sides would be doors, the east end would be rock face.
And
Some,
then everything would be earth tone.
everything earth tone.
And you could approve the colors before I could submit samples or whatever.
Sure.
That's, is it possible to go like 75%, or you guys want to go all the way up?
Why don't we wait and see and calculate, will you submit the elevations and calculate the actual square footage of 100% of your structures? I think you're still gonna be far less than 50%, you know what I mean?
Oh, I see what you're saying, because if you factor in the west side and the east side and the south, yeah, so, okay, I'll agree to 100% of the east side, just to be able to move forward, the direction we're going.
Okay, did you want to add anything to that motion?
Can you repeat that, Jason?
Yeah.
So, the motion is approve the lot split, approve the conditional use permit for multiple buildings on a single site that meets the fire chief requirements. So if it's 22 or 24 with the hammerhead and that size, as long as it meets the fire chief's requirements. As far as from a screening standpoint, the motion is leave the current site plan as it sits, but add lilacs or the right type of shrubs on the back side of the west side of that fence where it's close. And then from a stone standpoint, the recommendation is earth tones approved by, is it Liz and her team, for color samples, and 100% of the east side of the buildings will be stone up the 8 foot. That's the motion.
Okay, Commissioner Moore, do you?
Beautiful motion.
I would still like to keep my second.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? So we'll call for the vote this time. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Sorry it took so long, but this is a complicated one.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is the final plat approval, a request by Mark and Michelle Post for property owned at 19335 Burns Parkway Northwest to approve a revised preliminary plat and a final plat for subdivision of 44.8 acres into 4 residential lots. We're gonna turn it over to Liz Stockton, our planner, now and present this to us.
Thank you. Mr. Posey and his team have done a great job amending the plans, providing a revised preliminary plat and final plat. The city engineer had no issues with the revisions. There's one thing that needs to be amended. So when we did the original preliminary plat, we were showing shared driveways along some of these lot lines. Anoka County is not going to require that. So he would like to change the design so that each house has its own driveway. They have to be 30 feet either side of the shared lot line here for lots 1 and 2, and then the shared lot line here for lots 3 and 4. So that would meet the county standard, and then would negate his need to file easement agreements, record those. So that's the preference there. Very minor, and everybody's in agreement about that on the staff end. Here's the final plat. You haven't had a preliminary final plat in quite some time. Go through now then. Many of you may not even have seen one. The final plat typically contains just the lot lines and the drainage easements. And that is what gets recorded at the county. Now, one special request, I'll first go through this, just to highlight part of the review process is evaluating the impervious surface requirements. So Posey's hired a civil engineer and they calculated impervious surface of driveways and, evaluated runoff, and basically determined that there were no stormwater ponding requirements necessary. So that was also signed off on by the city engineer. This is just another segment or details showing those calculations and the topographic changes in the driveway. So the one special request the Posey's had was to delay payment of the park and trail fees until after they sell a lot or 2 or 3. So in order to accomplish that, I spoke with the city attorney, and he prepared what I passed around earlier, which it's basically a very brief development agreement which allows the Poseys to pay the park and trail fees by June 1st of 2018. And if they fail to meet that date, then the city moves to assess those in 2 installments to their property taxes. But after the sale of the lot, it should be a very minor issue. So this is just the agreement to cement that discussion, and the city council will need to approve that development agreement. So that is it. The plat looks great with a couple minor changes. Staff recommends approval.
Okay. Do we have any questions, more questions to ask?
So does they ask for the planning and zoning to approve the agreement for the park and trail fees associated, or is that a city council business?
No, you can make a recommendation to move forward with that developer's agreement,
Okay.
and that you have no problem with delaying that payment.
Is the applicant here, do they have any,
Yeah, Mr. Posey and Mr.
anything you want to add to this?
No, it's just bought us a little time. We'll have the money by June, I can assure you that. We've kind of exhausted a lot of our savings, so that's why we're not going anywhere, and we're not gonna let the $7,500 hold us up.
Okay. Is there anyone here in the audience that is opposed to this or have any questions? Okay, do we have any questions? Yes,
James, I would just ask if Liz could share that with council prior to Tuesday so we can look at that agreement.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Pick up, Harold. This one's all you.
This one's on you, Harold.
questions about this at all? If not, I'll make a motion to recommend to the council, subject to the conditions having to do with the lawyer's statement.
Development agreement.
Developer's agreement. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that was easier.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Way to
waiting.
go, Harold. Oops, that's your show. First, I like it. And they were the first ones here.
Well, I know, but I had to put some public hearing.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item is a concept divisional, a request by Dan Gustafson family for property located at
That's number 4.
Mr.
what was this for? I missed.
You're on 5.
Oh, I missed. Okay, for the minor subdivision. Request by Matt Ward for property owned at 66350 Viking Boulevard to split 58.56 acres into 3 residential lots. Okay, Planner Stockman.
Thank you. So for those of you that longtime residents of Nowland, this is the old Paulson property, 58.56 acres located on Pickerel Lake. So Mr. Ward is proposing to split the property into 3, live on the largest parcel himself and sell the other 2 10-acre pieces. This is a little hard to see on here, but so the largest piece is located with the lake shore. It has access to the south to Old Viking. His driveway will lead through the wetlands here. And then the old farmstead has been parceled off, that's parcel C. And there's a 66-foot access which goes out to the salt to allow for long-term, possible split of this approximately 39-acre piece, parcel A. So we just did that as a precautionary measure because there are so many wetlands on the south side here, which is his official access to parcel A. But putting a street in there at some point in the future may not be 100% feasible. So he was open to that, and we really appreciated that as staff looking, allowing that for the future. So parcel B is also a 10-acre parcel. He's shown the 2 anticipated home sites. And pretty straightforward. So if there's any road there to be dedicated, the city engineer has not reviewed this, so that has been included as a condition of approval. Mr. Ward does wish to move forward with the building permit, and I told him that he could do that because he has 2 existing parcels. One is this larger piece, which has frontage on basalt, and the other piece is currently this triangle one it's got the farmhouse on it down here. So he currently has two parcels and two buildable rights. So in order to let him get going this fall, he is going to start his driveway. May have already done that today, but he's working on the driveway, and then we'll submit for the building permit. Really the outstanding issue here with this one is not only city engineer review, but the potential trail. As I mentioned in the memo, we do have a county trail shown along Old Viking as part of the Anoka County regional trail planning. So the North Anoka County Regional Trail runs part of the way along Viking and then part of the way along Old Viking. And then from the town center, we have the Sugar Hills County Regional Trail, which will go north toward St. Francis. So I guess ideally what we'd like to see is that additional 20 feet dedicated there along Old Viking to assist the county in someday providing that or constructing that trail through our city. So I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on that. And as staff, we would recommend approval.
Okay, any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Reagan.
So just to clarify, right now, the Old Viking has just a 33-foot right-of-way, and that is basically not changing because it's just a lot split.
Well, correct. I did include that reference to, sorry, what's it called when we get aid from the state there, you know, when state aid route. Shane, the city engineer, looked up the state aid route information and determined that 66 feet was the right-of-way width required, so we would not be asking for any additional right-of-way. We just want to be sure that that 33 feet has already been dedicated to the city. But I would recommend that we ask for the additional 20 feet just for the trail and sometime in the future.
Any other questions to ask our planner?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I guess you see that being feasible with how much wetland is taken to the road there?
Well, that's, yeah, something that,
Or with the trail that's in the south side of the road?
The south
Or we
side
make
is,
bridges.
south side
Pardon?
of Warps.
Or we make bridges.
Pretty bad.
oh, yeah.
Because they're not gonna cross over, right?
Let's see there.
That will be those platform walkways.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Burrow.
knowing that road pretty well, no matter which side we're gonna potentially put a trail on, it's low on both sides of that road in lots of spots. Plus, we're looking at a lot of houses that don't have the 20-foot already included in there.
Right.
And that's a lot out, but in this situation, you're suggesting that the trail would be on the north side of the road if it ever was done.
Well, yeah, trails do switch back and forth based on terrain. And I agree, you know, Old Viking in general is pretty tough. It's got pretty deep ditches in a lot of spots. But that additional 20 feet allows us, you know, quite a bit of wiggle room with an 8-foot trail to regrade or fill as the case may be. I mean, this would be long, you know, time ahead project that would be county directed and county, you know, probably using a grant or something, you know, however the county wants.
There's a lot of houses that this would impact on, that are close to the
Oh,
property.
yeah, and they realize that.
Are you talking just a 20-foot easement then, or a 20-foot dedication?
A trail easement is what we typically do, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
doesn't seem like it's good use of our resources there at all to put that trail along Old Viking. Because New Viking, you've got a natural trail right on the road, on the side of the road. You got a big ditch, everything is there, no money to expend. Stick right there now. You wouldn't have if you were thinking about saving some dollars, that's just a waste going through there. Because you got holes by that corner, and by Tommy Kemper's there's a water hole right there. Yeah, and the houses, a lot of those houses don't meet the setbacks along there.
Yeah, the house right on the corner before that, right as you're going left there, I think it's right on the corner.
And Fort Brook has got some bad feeder lines further on down there. And if you went right down 22, man, you just straight shot and you got it, and you wouldn't have to put no money into it. If anybody was thinking about something like that. The only advantage that thing does, it gives you an access to Pickerel Lake.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's the only thing that is, and you could use any other way to get there beside that, you know, because that's not a cost-effective. You know, you're just spending money there to spend money. That's all it's doing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Well, it is a county project, so
it's,
it's not, you know, it's not up to the city. I
But
totally
they-
understand what you're saying. that
Yeah,
it's-
but they should recommend to them, because where Jasper hits it there, that's a safety issue right there. I don't care what you do with that thing, you don't never get a good trail along there. It's, because you can get wiped off the road right now with your car if you ain't careful there, because there's no visibility there. And until that road is really redesigned, if it ever does, and it may never get there, I think you're wasting your time.
Okay. Well, you could go with option B and ask for the cash.
Might be better, because you could use it better than to create a safety hazard for people there. Right now, you've got fences right in the right of way.
Is that a motion, Harold?
Come on, Harold.
But that's what I'd say. It's just,
is the applicant here?
Yep.
Would you like to speak to it?
I don't want to pay any cash, if that's what you're asking, but I'd rather just give the 20 feet.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just building a house, I'm not building a development.
Well, what does the commission think here? What do we recommend?
Liz, help me, what would the fee actually be? Because it's only 2 lots, right? Because there's an existing home, so the park and trail dedication fee would be
5,000.
5,000, not 7,500.
Right, so if you've got, let's say, almost a quarter mile of, you got maybe what, 1,200 times 20, what is that? I'm trying to think of the, you know, approximate value of the land.
Are you guys quantifying, is it 5,000, 25 for each one?
Yes, per lot,
I don't care, that's fine. Either one,
either way.
it don't matter to me, I thought it was big money.
Oh, okay.
Because it was, no one told me about it, so if it's 2,500 per lot, you can have the land or you can have the money, I don't care.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we're only creating one additional lot. Can we go to B1?
Well, you have two new buildable parcels.
Yep.
2 new buildable
You
parcels.
have 2 lots.
Well, he's got 2 existing parcels.
You have 2 existing parcels, you're making 3 parcels. So it's 1 new parcel. Because right now, you can build on other parcels the way it is. He's only really creating 1 additional parcel.
Problem
I
is
like
though,
the
the problem is though that parcel C on this encroaches into the one large parcel.
Right.
Because that's one triangular odd piece there. So I see what you're saying, but
Like I said, it's 2 parcels down.
reconfiguring everything.
He's reconfiguring the 2 and creating a 3rd.
I guess we have talked about that in the past, haven't we? I mean, usually, you know, you're creating, you know, you're building homes, you're bringing people to use your park and trail system. So, you know, it's usually per resident. But you're right, I mean, if you were not to split anything, he could still build a house on the larger parcel. But, you know, the buildings, the outbuildings in the farmstead kind of cross over that lot line, so. At any rate, but he could have, you know, or pursue the lot reconfiguration just in and of itself. So it's really up to you. You make the recommendation.
So
Whether
is it 2 or 1?
well, that, you know,
Barry?
Gary thinks it's 1.
Barry, is it 2 or 1?
In my thought, it's just, from discussions that we've had before,
Because we want to be consistent.
I would think it would just be one.
It just went down in price.
He has 2 parcels and he's creating 3, so.
Well, it makes sense because there's already one house there, one lot there, and just get one more on Viking, all Viking.
Especially if he's pulling a building permit already.
Yeah, he can't do that.
Okay, it's 5 to 9.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
I'll take it. I got this.
Commissioner
Yes, that's a big-
Mullen.
So I would make a motion to approve it with one, if we're not taking the 20 feet, I guess, for the, so it'd be $2,500.
One cash
Trail.
contribution.
Yep, in cash. And that's it, right? 'Cause everything's
Subject to
same.
the conditions as outlined.
Right, correct.
Yep.
Subject to the conditions as outlined.
So I would revise item 4, which would be, one Parker Trail.
Yep.
Okay, do we have a second to this motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Alders,
Can't
second
leave
it.
you hanging.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
I have something I'd like to say here. One of the conditions here is 33 feet of right-of-way is dedicated to the city for old biking and salt streets. Look at plans, most of the salt street is not within our property, so I'm guessing that what you're thinking is that you need a full 66-foot right-of-way there. And that's what we have, but we would actually be dedicating only maybe 15 feet to create that 66 feet of what the right-of-way.
So, I don't understand, because the salt's not centered in the right way?
Right, but if the salt was centered on our property line here. So here's our property line. Generally, a road would be centered on that property line, and you'd want 33 feet on each side. But here, the center line is quite a ways over, so what I would like to propose is just have the 66 feet from the right-of-way on the other side of the road, which isn't going to take a full 33 feet of our property,
Which
Mr. Ward's property.
I think that's what it shows already, right?
Right, and that's what we're showing is a 66-foot right-of-way, but it's not centered.
Right, it's from the other side.
Right.
not-
But I think the other side has subdivision, doesn't it?
Right, the other side is subdivided and they platted up to the quarter line here.
Okay.
For the government lot line.
How much do they have dedicated on their side? Do you know? How much is platted on that? for the
Now it's
salt
probably
40.
about 45 feet, I'm just eyeballing it here.
I see, okay. So to make up that difference of the 66 total.
Right, so we don't want to dedicate the full 33 feet onto our parcel. We just want to
Dedicate whatever.
dedicate
66
whatever is
foot right away.
necessary for the 30, to create a 66-foot right-of-way there.
It sounds okay to me, but like I said, it will be subject to review by Shane, so.
Sure.
Is that,
Yeah,
we
that's
leave it
fine.
that way for now?
Mhm.
Is that okay to the commission?
I have one input on that. We've just got a potential,
Just say the 5 grand.
we've got a potential, we've got a potential park corridor that runs that whole dirt loop there too. So it goes around the lake, so I don't know if that's something to consider too in the process of this.
What do you mean?
The-
Are you talking about the park search area? In this graphic here? Right
Yeah,
here?
the pink line that goes around.
Oh,
outside-
this,
Yes.
what this is showing is an on-street trail.
Okay, oh, that's what that means.
So we don't acquire right-of-way for
Got
that.
it,
We
that's what I was
just-
wondering what that was.
Yeah, so that just provides connection between the other trails, by walking on the local streets. So we wouldn't ask for it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay, do we have a second?
I seconded it.
Okay,
I was gonna vote for it.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
So I'm sorry, who seconded?
Jason.
Oh, Jason.
Jason. Dr. Alders.
Okay, now we'll go to 5. Conceptual division plan, request by Dan Guston family for property located 2085020-853 Ingen Boulevard to subdivide 142.24 acres into residential partials. Okay, our planner, Ms. Stockman, present.
Okay. Gustafson Concept. So Gustafson's Goodall's own 10 existing parcels surrounding Bear Lake to the northwest of our city center. They have about 142 acres, lots of wetlands and lake shore. We came to staff asking for a layout of their property so they could get an idea of how this might lay out with streets and future lots. Their intent is kind of to stay along the periphery here. There's 2 existing homes. One is right here next to the lake, and the other is down around this area. So right now, this is, a pretty good sized lot with this house, and then this house is separate parcel, and they kind of share this driveway that goes way up here to Ingen. So they purchased from neighboring landowners and achieved connection down here where Ingen starts, and can make this a T intersection, which is great, and then they can begin developing, if they wish, subdividing as they go north here. We don't have any connections as of yet on the other end up here. The intent would be to get up to, what is that,
211.
211, okay. And then also someday to make some connection over here to Tiger, is that?
Yeah.
I can't read. Anyway, they've had this partially delineated, what they owned previously, and would obviously move forward with all the formalities. But we're looking just for your blessing. A lot of these lots, some of these are more like a 2.5 acre lot. Some are larger, more like 5 with the wetlands that they include. Obviously, after we get some of the delineation back, we could be, or they could be more definitive in their exact lot sizes. But I think just achieving or trying to, market some of these properties on the west side of their land. So basically just looking for comments or thoughts on this. I think it lays out pretty well. And the fact that we're able to get a through street there on the other side of the lake is great. One thing I did point out in the memo is, again, our park and trail plan is showing up. These are the yellow trails on our plan are considered nature trails, which could be wood chip or just mowed paths even. Or possibly, a paved path through a natural area, or even boardwalks in some cases. So that really doesn't need to be defined if we come forward with some sort of a lot split or a preliminary plat, we could address those things. But just to make you aware of that.
So does the current proposal meet the requirements of an average of the 5 acres per lot?
It does. I'm estimating 22 to 26 lots that they could get out of here, and then that would be between 5 acre average and a 6.5 acre average, depending on how many they can achieve. A lot of this east side here is undevelopable. They might be able, with some real large lots, get a couple of other home sites in here if they were willing to kind of realign the driveway. So once access comes from the south here, they may not need this long driveway that they currently have. You could have a cul-de-sac in this vicinity, or, you know, otherwise somehow share. In fact, right in here, I showed the possibility of, you know, splitting up one flag lot into here to get access way into this lake area, but, you know, those details are a little premature, but, so,
But we wouldn't set it up with a flag lot, correct?
pardon me?
We wouldn't set it up with a flag lot going into it.
Well, in certain situations where it's a dead end and there's a, you know, kind of a bay like that where you might be able to get a home site in there, but you don't want to construct a road in that far, we would allow by a conditional use permit, we do have a provision to allow one flag lot, or I believe it reads, you know, 10% of a total subdivision, regarding number of lots. But in some cases it is appropriate, and generally we like to stay away from them, but, you know, if it's the difference of constructing another couple hundred feet or even more of public street that only serves one lot, it doesn't make a lot of sense, so. Any thoughts, Mr. Gustafson? We haven't really talked even since we kind of laid this out.
No, really what we're looking for, in talking with my family, it's my grandparents and my parents' property, and we'd like to build up there too. We don't necessarily need 22 or 26 lots. It could be 10 or 12 lots and a green space or a park as well. I mean, we're content with trails and everything like that. We really just want you guys to look over that and sort of say, you know, we like this idea or don't like this idea, and sort of move forward from there. And this isn't something that is in the next 2 years or 5 years. I mean, I keep telling my parents they're old, but they're not that old.
So my kids tell me too.
Yeah, tell me about it. This is primarily because, just given the opportunity, because like Ms. Stockman was saying, you know, our driveway is 5/8 of a mile, which I really hate plowing. So if we're able to make it off of a cul-de-sac or get easier access in, and now that we have that far southern property, we have that availability to do that.
Do you live back in there today?
What's that?
Do you live back in there today? Is
My
that-
parents do.
Okay.
It's my parents and my grandparents. They're all out of the country or out of the state at this moment.
There is a lot of lowland back there.
There's a lot of lowland.
I only show like one, maybe 2 fields being, looks like farmed, maybe 3.
Well, in the southern area, a lot of it is just done in hay, and about half of that they had stopped doing it at some point.
Okay.
None of the area around the lake until you get to the northern part, where you can obviously see where they farm. Other than that, it's not overly low, but it's questionable stuff, no doubt. I know that some people on the west side that are off of Tiger were interested in splitting off their back portions at some point over the last 3 years, and this would sort of facilitate that as well. And if we needed to, they may allow us to shift over and sort of create the road a little farther to the west, so that those would be buildable for ours as well.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
so it is a gorgeous area, and we do have a trail concept through there.
We actually already have a trail through there too. That we've cut.
Around the lake?
Yeah.
Oh.
So in your concept, you're thinking parkland or trail fits with what you're thinking?
Correct.
Because it really is one of the most beautiful spots in Wetlands. If your plan would include something like that, I think that would be,
Well, I think that's beneficial for everybody.
yeah.
So, we're 100% on board with that.
What are the chances of continuing that road up to 211th? I mean, have you talked to that property owner at all?
I have not talked to them. I've only spoken to a few of the owners off of Tiger.
That goes right, isn't that Merrimack right back there?
Yes, sir.
I don't know anybody
Yeah,
on the
right
north
here.
end.
That's
Merrimack's
That's
over
Merrimack
just to
right
the
there.
left of that, just west of that. Yeah, if I could swing over to Tiger and up to 211, that really.
Yeah, because I know that we have a plethora of north-south and not enough east and west.
Well, and Engen's an interesting road, but it's not the best north-south road we think. But that's all the way up to 211 to cut over it.
Right.
Makes it hard to develop in there.
So this is the concept of max home density, correct? Based on a
Pretty much.
5-acre average. So is there another concept that incorporates, what if it was 10 acre or 10 lots and it had a park or a resident or some sort of a community area in the middle?
Like a shared green space.
Yeah,
This is real early in its infancy of sort of
right.
getting things in front of you guys so that you're familiar with the property and we can take the feedback given from you guys and move forward in the best for everybody.
In your opinion, because you know the land a little more personally, would the shared green space be something more along the top northwest corner, or would it be something more, between the two wetlands there?
I actually think that the best shared green space would be off that cul-de-sac on the right, on the south end.
Okay,
Just so to the north of the southern wetland
yep.
is
So right
probably,
between them all.
right, is probably the best area when you look at the landscape around it.
Where's that at?
The dead spin, right?
That's center.
He's talking right
Right in
now.
the middle? Okay.
And actually,
If you look on the picture on the right, just south of the red line there, but to the north of the,
Right there?
on the right.
On the right
it's-
picture.
Yeah,
Oh, here.
yeah, but
Right in
ju-
here.
no,
Down,
down just a little bit.
right there.
Up. Yeah, sort of just south of that.
it looks like a park right now.
Right. It at one time was, they had done hay on it or alfalfa or something, so it sort of goes down and it's a relatively flat area already, which would make it easy to do.
Did you grow up there?
What's that?
Did you grow up there?
I wish. My brother and sister grew up there. My grandparents built in '89, and then my folks built in 2000. So my brother and sister grew up there.
So your grandparents are the lower one down by the lake?
Yes,
That's the good old?
correct.
Hunter Stockman, would that all the lots be buildable you got in there?
Well, we don't really know officially until we get wetland delineations and soil boring to, prove buildability, but, generally, I'm fairly good at estimating, so.
Whoa!
I mean, reading an aerial photograph is an actual art, by the way. So,
But what you're really saying is this is the densest it would be, and they could do no more than this, but they could reasonably do less and
Yeah.
still be happy.
yeah, I think so.
And the city could gain out of it through the trails and or parkland.
Yeah, that would be really
But
wonderful.
it really is a beautiful area. So where'd you go?
Golden Valley. about as dense as it gets.
At least it's pretty,
It is
pretty
great.
areas in Golden Valley.
So what's the next step here? Because it would be interesting to see another concept that says, hey, what does a park area look like? And it obviously would be, there's not as many homes developed on that, but what's that floor plan look like? Is that something that Liz would do, or is that something that you're looking for feedback on? I mean, it's kind of up to you. I mean, if you look at our current ordinances, this would tell you, hey, here's max density, and we could debate what the road material needs to be and all that good stuff coming off of Ingen, and if it could hook up to 211 someday, but that's the max density, right, from a 22 to 25 homes on it. If there's a different scenario for you and your family that says, hey, that's great, we want to do 10 to 12 and put a park in the middle of it, I think that's, I mean, it's really not necessarily our call.
But at the end game it is.
Well, our call is to try to align what your development is to our current ordinances, and our current ordinances say you can have a minimum of 2.5 acres if the average is 5, and based on the current ordinances, I think Liz has laid out what that looks like, right?
Exactly.
So the next step is for you to kind of go back with your family, it's like, is that the number of houses that you want out there? If you guys are going to live out there as well, or do you want fewer homes in a big park space, and what's that look like, and what's that look like from a development standpoint? And those are questions that, you know, it's not me to answer.
Sure. One question I had for the council is, if you were to approve, just hypothetically speaking, this plan in its current form, how long is that approval good for? Is it 90 days? Is it 6 months? Or is it just continuous until something else gets done?
Mr. Chair, the concept plans really are not approved officially. If we were to have like a preliminary plat drafted and approve that, that's only good for a period of, 1 or 2 years before you have to start final planning.
Okay.
But, so you kind of have to, you can come back really with as many concepts as you'd like, or we can refine this one and present it. If you want sort of a blessing, that's fine too, but it's really no formal approval.
Sure.
So in other words, Liz, there's nothing further that we can do here then? It's just it's just something that's presented to us and trying to get our ideas.
Correct.
Yep. Really don't need any formal.
We like the trails, we like the park. We like
Okay.
it's open a space as your family's comfortable with. This is max density. and connecting the 211 and Tiger Wood Mills.
Okay. I think what we'll do is we'd like to rework it then and shrink it down to something like Jason said. Sorry, I can't see your last name. Alders. With a park in there and work a trail through there and something like that, so that we can
that'd be great.
move forward that direction.
Always nice to have those before the houses start going up. Related.
Right.
Okay then.
When your family gets back, if you want to set up a meeting, let me know.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going on to the last one, Jerry. Conceptual subdivision plan, a request by Volunteers of America and Jerry Bowers for property in the vicinity of St. Francis Boulevard and North Lake Road to split off excess VOA land for purpose of selling to Mr. Brower. And planner, would you present copy?
Well, so Mr. Bauer, the VOA representatives, and myself met a couple of different times to discuss how this would work. Mr. Bauer has actually already purchased some full 40-acre pieces, that were separate already. These are the parcels that So just to, a little background, we have basically 3 40-acre parcels up here by Norris Lake and a little bit of land that, this actually is an incorrect drawing. This only shows the 3 40-acre pieces on kind of the south side of Norris Lake. This being the Bar None development. The next map shows it better. VOA actually owns this little strip of land up here along between Norris Lake Road and the lake. So they, upon sale to Mr. Bauer, he would own actually this whole northern side of Norris Lake. And we did discuss about, you know, people using the lake for fishing and whatnot, canoeing. And, you know, he has indicated that he's fine with that as long as people are respectful. And that makes some sense. But this map shows it better how we've got these 3 40s here, here, and here that are within now then. So this line is the city limits. So this 40 that provides access to Bar None out to 47 is actually an old road. And so they have to approve, of course, their own split for this 40 acres. But what we're looking at are these 3 pieces. This is actually a combined piece, so it's a little greater than 40. But volunteers want to carve out just what they need and then sell the excess. So their lot lines at the end of this would look like this in the blue boundary. And then Mr. Bauer, he agreed to combine these small pieces that are split off with his existing land. Because there, as you can see here, is very limited access. We have no access up to Norris Lake Road, and we basically have no access to 47 from this upland area, except where the Bar None driveway is. So Mr. Bowers agreed to combine these small pieces with his existing land. His intent right now is really to do nothing. He hunts on the land, and a lot of this is wetland and cannot be developed. There is this high spot here and kind of a little strip down here. So right about in this vicinity on the south of this little patch, and this abuts the Morton Farm Road that dead ends at the end of that subdivision. So there is potential to extend that Waco Street up to the north and into this area. But right now there are no plans, and volunteers again is just looking to eliminate some of their excess land and use it for their operations rather than just holding it. So it's basically a big lot reconfiguration, and not a lot to evaluate other than just they wanted to bring the concept to you though before they go through with the formal survey. I did agree, and I'm hoping that you will agree to waive the wetland delineation requirements at this time. I mean, with the number of wetlands we have in here, it would be thousands of dollars, and if volunteers are not looking to develop and Mr. Bauer's not looking to develop, it makes sense just to wait until something in the future comes up, because they're only good for about 5 years. So another reason, to combine is so that we don't need to pursue the lot buildability information necessarily anyway. They're not opposed to doing a few soil borings if the commission or council would like that, but it really is the cost of the wetland delineation that they're trying to avoid at this time.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Reagan.
what is on this small piece that's just in there?
They have a little building back there, and I think it's like a bunkhouse. You know what I mean?
It's a treatment center,
Oh,
and
it
they're
is?
not using it right now, they
Oh.
can't, I don't know why they're not using it, it's the newest building and they're not using it, it's a shame, I don't know why.
Didn't she, was that the one where she said it needed something done to it or not?
No, they were looking at another, no, they're not using, there was another couple buildings that needed to put carpeting in and flooring, but that one they're not using. That's the newest one they put in.
The one on the far left.
Yeah. this
Yeah, the one way up there, they're not using it. So if you know anybody that wants to put a rent a building from them, they got one extra.
So Liz, the action here is, I mean, the VOA is asking to reconfigure their own lot to a smaller size, and then all the adjacent property after they reconfigure is going to be sold to Mr. Bauer
Correct. And then he agreed to combine it.
with his existing properties.
Yeah, and I'm
So-
going to ask that they combine their, 3 or 4 little parcels
Into one.
into one that we have in now then, and then their piece that's in Oak Grove would be separate. So it's basically a big lot reconfiguration. I would propose that this could be done administratively, that when they get the necessary survey work done.
So what's the action for the planning and zoning?
Just make a recommendation regarding the proposal, and I would make a motion if you agree to waive that wetland delineation at this time. Until, we could stay it until the property is developed, because we always have to have the delineation for development and measure setbacks from those wetland boundaries, et cetera, and obviously know where upland is.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Are we okay with the access, the only access being for piece of Nelson being through Oak Grove? Since that's sort of the separate parcel?
Well, it must be, because that's the way it is. I mean, that's the only choice we have right now.
Well, I mean,
so-
this parcel technically right now has access up the north lake up here, even though it's wetland, I guess, but it has road frontage. But that's fine.
Well,
So-
yeah, I mean, unless you want to impact, there's a lot of wetland to get through right here, you know.
No, I was just asking if that was
It is
an issue.
it's a difficult situation. I mean, if there were a subdivision to come through up in this high spot here, what I would recommend, and I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing that the city engineer would agree that we have some sort of an agreement with Volunteers of America to use their driveway as an emergency access, should we need it, or, that it provides an outlet for, fire emergency vehicles. If you ever had a fire and you're circulating tanker trucks through there, you really don't want that number of homes on a dead end. So I can envision a street coming up from Morton Farm and probably making a circle loop in here, but then just, very minor opening to somehow get through, even if it's just gravel, if it were ever needed to get out that way, because that is the only outlet. But other than that, I mean, for Barnon to just use it like they're using it, it's not a huge.
Did you ever check to see if they got a CUP?
I don't know if I ever did check on that.
Nice to know as much as.
That was long in the days before it was anything like that.
I think they started there in 1947.
VOA did?
Yeah. A lot of that land was donated to them. There's go down to the local history. It was a farm. It's kind of a whole history on how the guy gave the land to that treatment center. It wasn't Volunteers of America back then. I don't think it was something else.
Oh.
It was kind of a history. It was kind of a neat history back there.
I think they used to call it the sheriff's.
And that was in Isani. It was a sheriff's home. It was in Isani. But this was.
This has been going on for a long time.
this, was, they had houses they used and they had to put everything together.
Did you know if the farmstead sat right on this property, or was it like up by where you are?
Right where I was, there was the barn, 2 silos. Yeah, and then that house was built, part of the house was built in 1800, I guess, right around the turn of the century.
Barry, were you going to I guess the question is, the uses has changed, they may be set something in 1927, they're already running a school.
They have, yeah, they just did that, didn't they, integrating classes with the treatment.
So I mean, just with the change in use, we should see if there's is there a required permit to move the school onto the property, change the way they're using it.
Any further discussion on it? We need a motion to recommend to the city council about the lot reconfiguration and eliminate the wetland delineation report.
I'll make a motion to, move forward with this conceptual lot reconfiguration. And I recommend that we do waive the delineation. This is going to be one massive development once it goes into it. There's going to be a lot more to it.
Okay, Commissioner Carroll made the motion. Somebody like to second it?
I'll second.
Barry Wagner seconds it. Discussion?
Apparently it's never been out there.
Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, there's one motion left.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Burrows made it. Commissioner Mullen seconded it. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Well, I'm supposed to have these.
We did the last 4 or 5 in the same one as we did the first one. And why is the clock on?
That's me.
Because everybody stared at it?
We got those. I think those
I think there was just me that didn't get one.
You just.
I think they
Wait, we just move it?
9:30.
get back, I can do that.
Yes, it is. It's working, but Liz, the reason they didn't put it there is because
That's the worst one.
something is.
There's a lot to
In 2
that.
years.
Oh, the first one. It's not.
As far as the-
Something, I don't know.
Oh, that's not the same.
They have so many holes in the walls.
That's the very first one.
Yeah, this big one.
The building's gonna fall down if we put
Something
more
about
screw in
that, that's
it.
how they designed it. Yeah, they have to. It's a
It's just about to charge it.
But
You can just get those